entrepreneurs remain shadowed. Here, I team up with these hidden talents to unveil their challenges and successes. Dive in with me to unearth entrepreneurial gems, learn from our experiences, and get educated. I want to move into your journey of sobriety and the lessons learned there. But I'm curious, you leave your boyfriend, and I think you're homeless for a little while.
Almost 10 days, and I didn't even realize it because I was going I didn't know the true from the false. I wasn't on drugs, but I was in some sort of a psychosis of a mental breakdown between the abuse and the physical abuse and lack of sleep and just I was afraid to go home. I got arrested one time because they didn't want to arrest me, but I wouldn't tell them where I lived. And it was just down the street, but I wouldn't give them my address. And then I got all these, this is maybe TMI, but I got all these credit card charges that are still on my record. Because he owned a restaurant, we would use old credit cards that people left years prior to cut up the drugs so that it wasn't on our cards. But they were all stored in my wallet. So when the cops went through my wallet, I have all these credit cards that aren't mine, which I was like, how was I going to tell them, I'm not using them to go shopping. I'm just using them to chop up drugs, So it was just stuff that you can't even make up. Yeah, it was insane. I ended up, I was on ESPN and Sports Illustrated as a kid for my talent, and then I wound up on ESPN for putting my feet in Coach Calipari's pool because he was our neighbor, and I thought that my boyfriend bought me the house for beating me so much, and he felt bad for me. I didn't know what was true and what was false.
And so when you finally went, to the rehab for the last...
My dad actually got me admitted to a mental hospital for a week. And then from there I went to a rehab, and then I went to a sober living.
Yeah, and you shared a story with me about, there are a few stories I do know, but you did share a story about, your interview getting released from the mental hospital.
Oh, yeah. Because you have to prove your sanity, which of course I'm in there and they won't give me, I'm begging just to get my shoelaces back, but they won't give you those because you might hang yourself with them. And I'm like, I know they can't keep me here more than 3 days because I've had friends that have wound up in these places, but they can if they think you're nuts enough. And I had to go in front of a judge, and I remember they asked me if I was still hearing voices. And I, in fact, was. But I knew if I said that I was still hearing said voices, I was never going to get out of that place. So I said no. And 2 days later, they sent me to a rehab about 2 hours away. And it was all state funded and whatever. So luckily, my dad wasn't having to pay for more crap for me.
How many days were you in that state of psychosis where you were hearing voices and
I heard auditory stuff for years.
Years prior?
No, probably for 6 months to a year before I left, and then I probably heard them for another year after I got sober.
Wow.
It was more like hearing my own thoughts. It was weird. That's how I would explain it.
I've had two friends, two people that I know that have gotten to the point of psychosis with drug use and alcohol abuse. One, exactly that, would hear voices all the time, and it was horrendous. And then I, unfortunately, a guy I went to school with, all through elementary school and high school, the psychosis got so bad, the voices convinced him he should set himself on fire.
Well, that's at one point they told me I should kill myself, and that's when I got really scared.
That's the voices told you that?
That it'd be better if I wasn't here, and that's when I got really scared.
And do you mind if I ask, and this is, well, from my own curiosity, but I really want people to understand you know, especially from this part of this thing where the psychosis, and then people get homeless, and that like, do the voices seem like it's like absolutely real? Like it's you talking to yourself, or is it somebody else talking to you? And how, at what level?
I thought it was like every person that ever cared about me. Like I heard my dad. I thought Kent was coming to pick me up. I thought my very first boyfriend was coming to get me at one point. Like it seemed so real. It was crazy. And I think it was maybe in a way like I was in such a relief to be off of the drugs that then I was like living in this fantasy world of what I thought my life could be. But it was all like magnified. But yeah, until I got out of toxicity, all it was negativity. It was like, you should kill yourself. Everyone hates you. Like, da 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 da. And then as soon as I walked out of that house, it was like almost a false sense of like being elated. Like, just the total opposite. Like anything was possible, and everything that I ever could have dreamed of could be true, and was true.
So it's just the toxic environment.
Yeah.
Really? Okay. I find that amazing. And it's like, you know, I find that
The brain is so powerful. You know, like my dad wouldn't believe me at first that I was still acting that way, not on drugs, until like I was like, ask the jail when they arrested me, they drug tested me. I was not on drugs.
But you had this euphoric feeling.
Yeah, and I didn't know the truth from the false. Like I wasn't making sense. Like, you know, it was bizarre. And then like, you know, I would hear they put me on some antipsychotics and stuff, and then I just took myself off of them once I was in the sober living, and I felt much better once I was off of them, and I didn't notice any voices coming back. So
in the article I read, you talk about being in the sober living as a bubble. How many times were you in and out of rehab, by the way?
Rehab is what I would call a bubble. Sober living is what saved my life, in my opinion.
Okay. Do you mind sharing the distinctions between the two?
Yeah.
And then,
I mean, I think everyone should go to rehab. I think it's a great jump off point, you know, especially for someone that is been using, needs help. You're in a safe space. You're in a controlled environment. You know, you're being drug tested. You're in classes all day. You are with the same people. Everything you do is controlled and monitored. You're in a certain place that you cannot leave. That, you know what I mean? You can't even go to the gas station. So like everything is a safe space. You're not in the real world. But then, okay, 30 days are up. Now you're cured. That's not realistic. Like, then they just plop you back out into real life and it smacks you in the face, and you're supposed to all of a sudden, I mean, it works for some people, I guess, but it certainly didn't work for me, because I never learned how to apply any of it to my life, nor did I really want to. I never went out and got a sponsor. Like in my sober living place, like they made you get a sponsor within the first 48 hours. I was just really lucky. I went to a very structured place, and if you weren't compliant, you got kicked out. Like they were like, this is the real deal. Like you either want it or you don't. And if you don't, GTFO.
you know, I've heard many people say like, it's hard to help somebody in this situation until they hit rock bottom. Do you feel that's a true statement, or what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it depends. Like, what do you consider a bottom? I mean, there were a lot of things that a lot of people would have been like, you didn't think that was a bottom? You didn't think that was a bottom? You didn't think that was a bottom? Like, you know, but, you know, I had bottoms with basements upon basements upon basements that then that basement fell through. And, I was just finally like, I was done with it. You know, I was done. I knew I really didn't want to do the drugs. I was afraid that I may go back to the relationship. And so that's why I chose to go to Texas. My father was out there, and I was like, that puts a good, at least, I'm not good with geography, but at least 1,000 miles between us. So it doesn't make it very easy for me to go back to him.
Is it fair to say that you were done with the drugs, and it was the fear of, the fear of, because you had mentioned earlier you thought he might kill you or she might kill you. Was it that really, do you think, was the threshold?
No, I didn't want to. I just wanted out of the toxicity. I wanted my life back. I didn't want to be a slave to the drugs. First of all, I knew I deserved better. I just needed to believe in myself again. And that's what I wanted more than anything, was to believe in myself and to know that I was worth believing in. And when I started to think that maybe it was better if I wasn't here, that scared me. That really I was like, something has to change. Because that's not me. And I was like really starting to think about it, and that's not me. I even reached out to some people about it, and then got yelled at for doing so, because they were friends of said boyfriend, that's not something to joke around about, and and I was like, well, I wasn't joking at all. I'm scared, and I just knew if I went back to him that we would get back in the drugs and it would just start all over, And I didn't want that for either one of us. I didn't want to see him lose his business that he's worked so hard for. And he still texts me to this day that he's in love with me. I almost feel bad for the poor girl, because I'm sure he's still with her. I don't know. I made my amends to him as you do in sobriety, and
Can you share with me? I'm really curious to know about the path to sobriety. And so you go to Texas, and you enter the sober living.
Yeah.
And so it's a little different than rehab. Rehab being a 30-day bubble type of thing.
Yeah.
And sober living is
90-day minimum.
90 days minimum.
Yeah, and the first 30 days you have no contact. You're not allowed to have contact with anyone from your family, because they want to break any codependency issues. And they're like, you're 40 years old. That shouldn't be difficult for you to not talk to your dad for 1 month. When you think about it, when I was using, I didn't talk to him for a month at a time purposely, because I was afraid to. And they forced you to get a real job, I never had a real job in my life. I had learned to use public transportation. I became the salad bar girl at Jason's Deli for $11 an hour. I paid my rent at the sober living. I learned to live off of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and, get up in 2.5 hours early for work, because the public transportation, you didn't know if they were going to show up in 5 minutes or in an hour and a half, and you couldn't afford to be late, and you couldn't work more than a certain amount of hours per week. And then after, it was through levels. And so then I became, I started to work very hard at it, because I started to realize it all made sense, and that all the tedious things, there was purposes to. And I still have the same sponsor that I got when I started, and I still keep in contact with the people that manage that place and that saved my life. And every time I'm in town, I try to make an effort to go see them. Now I'm losing my train of thought.
Well, that's okay, because I have a question that popped into my head while you were talking, which is, what is the what's the structure like in sober living? Is it really structured?
Well, it depends on where you go. Some places are less structured. I was really lucky. It was just by the grace of God. The first place I looked at looked really nice, but it was $80,000 a month. And I was not going to be asking my dad for that again. And this place, you could, basically they said they as long as I could get myself to Texas, they would help me. And I called, and it was just literally like a God thing. Like, the owner happened to answer the phone. She's never available. It normally takes days to get her on the phone or to get an interview with her. She answered the phone herself and spoke to me herself. And, because they want to know if you're serious, because they won't take you if you're not serious. And she could tell right away that I wanted my life back. Yeah. And she said, look, we can't take you until such and such state. So my dad said that he would pay for my plane ticket to get me there. I didn't even have a cell phone. So I flew from Lexington. I got a public transportation, like someone drove me to the airport. I flew and I looked for him when I landed, and he was there. And then I got to stay with him for like 48 hours. And then he dropped me off at the sober living place, and he joked because he said he looked in the rearview mirror, and it was reminded him of like getting drafted into Vietnam, because he did. And I was like, Dad, it wasn't that bad. He felt like bad leaving me there. And it was scary at first, like there was like a shooting down the street, and I'm like, of course I find a loophole where I can email my dad, which of course I then get busted, and I told him myself right away. But I thought for sure if I told him there was a shooting down the street, he was going to come get me, like, get me out of this place. Yeah. He was like, you'll be fine, and he was right. And I ended up getting to be a house manager, which then cut my rent in more than half of what it was. So I was working actually 3 jobs at one point. The Jason's Deli part-time, a couple days a week, I was getting to ride at one farm. And then I was managing, which is like you're drug testing people daily. You're in charge of reading the tests. If someone fails a test, it's up to you whether or not you kick them out that night or you give them until 9 a.m. the next day. Yeah, things like that. And like entering information into the computer and things like that, and making sure that girls are listening in the house. And sometimes you have to be the bad guy, which isn't fun. But, they asked me, like, why do you think you'd be a good house manager? Because I was very surprised. I was still on level 2, and there's 4 levels when I was asked to be a house manager. So I was caught a little off guard, and they said, well, why do you want to be a house manager? And I was like, well, the rent money, obviously. And that's when they laughed. They were like, you're the only honest person. Like, you actually just said the truth. Like, it was like, I mean, I think I'm a good leader, but honestly, who wouldn't want $150 off their rent? Like, so, yeah, and I actually, I completed the program before the 90 days was up. I think I stayed exactly like 90. And then I stayed in Texas that winter, like working at a barn where the people were already in Florida. And, I made a promise to myself that I would never spend another winter anywhere cold.
Smart. So did I.
So far, I stayed true to that.
Good for you. I'm curious, what were the biggest lessons you learned in sobriety?
Humility and perspective, I would say. Just perspective, and like that the big picture of life is, in the grand scheme of things, that the things that we worry about and that we obsess over are nothing. If you can realize before your mind gets on a tangent, I call it like future tripping, or, your thoughts get out of control into a way before you even realize you've been laying there for 3 hours thinking about something that makes no sense, that you've been worrying about now, and you've got yourself into a complete tizzy over, and you have no control over it anyways. So that there's a huge amount of freedom in that, and being able to just let go of things and to trust the process and to know that everything will always be okay. Like, even if it's not the way you think it should be, it works out how it's supposed to be. You know, you might not understand it at the time, and it might not be easy, but there's always a reason. And I think sometimes the most challenging situations are what we learn the most from. And if you can just remind yourself, it's easy to live when everything's going great.
Anybody can sail a ship in calm waters.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. I love the phrase future tripping. I wrote that down.
Yeah.
That's an awesome phrase. I often say like 97% of my problems that I've ever had in my life have never actually happened.
Right.
I created them in my mind before they happened, and then it was just wasted energy.
100%. Yeah.
You know, your thought about, you know, everything will be okay, even though it doesn't work out the way you want it to. It'll be okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's crazy. Like you know, your story is is the perfect example of that. And the crazy part is like, the story's not over yet. Like there's still another cliffhanger, guys, to come that we're gonna talk about. But it's, you know, that is such an amazing thing. And one of the other things that I picked up on in our conversation earlier was that you've made a few times you've said, you know, it's not their fault. You are taking the acceptance onto yourself, it seems.
Well, because I don't ever want anyone to think that I blame them, like, because I honestly don't. No one chose to put drugs in me besides me. No one chose to stay in an unhealthy relationship besides me. No one chose to rebel or put my dad through hell besides me. Like, he didn't do anything, you know what I mean? And I tried my best. I mean, of course, we all feel sorry for ourselves sometimes, but I think that that's a really toxic thing to do, is to be the victim, because there's nothing good comes from that either. You know what I mean? It's like, what can I learn from this? Even if I'm crying my eyes out because it's not how I wanted it to happen, or I had a different expectation. That's another thing that I learned a lot about, is expectations, is don't have them, because you're going to be let down. You know, and if you're going to do something for someone, check your motives. Make sure that you're doing it because you want to, not because, oh, guess what? Like, I bought you, you know, a new sweater because I want you to buy me a new car, you know, or because I expect you to do this or whatever. Like, that's an expectation, and that's not fair. That's not fair to do to the other person either. They can't read your mind. That's not.
Or even as minimal as getting a hug back from it.
Yeah. Yeah. People just sometimes aren't going to respond the way that you want them to. Like, you know, even when you're having a relationship, or a discussion in business or with anyone, you know, you can say your piece and that's all you can do. Like, the way they respond to it that's their choice.
Did you learn the responsibility piece in sober living, like or was this something that was your?
I didn't know that, but they teach you that. The place I went to teaches a lot out of they call it the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and a lot of meetings and a lot of like step work and things like that. But they make you work the steps properly, and learning what your character defects are, and because, like, okay, it's easy to drop the drug, the alcohol, the whatever, but what is causing you to use that as an escape? You're running from something that you haven't dealt with, you know? And so learning to learn how to live and accept life on life's terms, if that makes sense, you know?
No, it makes complete sense to me. I mean, it's oftentimes, I think we spend a good portion of our lives searching for something, and very seldom do you ever get exactly what you were searching for. Sometimes you might get more, but you also might get a lot less. And oftentimes it is less, or oftentimes it looks different. Like you said,
like the road to it is,
not at all the planned route.
right. Like you thought you were going to, jump on the turnpike and be in Fort Lauderdale in 30 minutes. And it's, you end up driving to California, Europe, and a few other places before you get to that destination.
Right. Yeah. Which actually could have happened in your life. Well, I mean, because it reminds me, and I mean, anytime I get the opportunity to share this with people, and it was like one of the greatest gifts that I've ever gotten, which was from, my previous mentor, God rest his soul. His name was Harold Cunningham, but he shared with me, I've had this quote on my phone for, I don't know how many years. Actually, I do know how many years, because I just pulled it up while we're talking. And the first time I entered it into my phone was 2013. So, that's now it was way before that, but it's been a long, long time. But it's the Serenity Prayer. It's part of the Serenity Prayer, which
it's how I live my life. I probably say that prayer about, I couldn't even tell you how many times I say it a day.
Yeah, I use the shorter version of it, which is, God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change.
The courage to change the things I can, and the willingness to know the difference.
That's right. Yeah, and having that wisdom to know the difference. And it's like,
I said willingness, God, wisdom.
But it's the same, really.
That's what gets me through. Anytime I start to panic, I just reset. That's my reset button, is to just stop and say that.
Actually, I kind of like what you said when you said willingness, because, sometimes having wisdom to know the difference is not necessarily the piece. Sometimes it is just the willingness to actually be open to the difference and to see it. And so actually, I kind of like that little modification that you make. So, okay, so you're now sober 2.5 years. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I mean, unbelievable, from where you're... the story is crazy in terms of you are the person that you would never think, the structure, the discipline, the success, the early on, but then one event can happen that can trigger a sliding scale. And I think that is part of the big message here, which is and you don't have as much control as you think unless you have that awareness built up.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of summarizing what I've heard from you.
100% right. Yeah.
And so I think that if there's one significant message to take away for anyone listening to this podcast in terms of their relationships with others, is the understanding that we all are vulnerable to anything like this. When you think you're not, then you are.
Exactly. Well, and in the way I see it, in my perspective anyways, is everyone escapes in some way from something. It doesn't have to be through drugs, or alcohol. People escape through shopping, reading,
food,
anything,
shopping, porn.
Exactly.
There's all kinds of things.
Even reading, it can be anything. There, over-exercising, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Anorexia, weight loss. The list goes on and on. I mean, so I was always taught by one of my mentors that an addiction can occur when you meet three or more needs at a high level.
Mm-hmm.
So your need for certainty, your need for variety, your need for significance, your need for love and connection, even need for growth or contribution. I mean, anything can be overdone, and addiction can happen and I kind of said it earlier, which is it can be empowering or it can be disempowering. And so if you know that, you are facing something. I just actually talked to a buddy of mine today who lost his 31-year-old son to cancer. And I was just I was talking to him this morning, and it weighs heavy on my heart. No, it's okay. And as my tears are for him and for his family, because they're such beautiful people, and I just love them so much. But those are those times where you go, okay, that incident is where we have to get very, very. I would use it's probably not the right word, but structured or very purposeful. In where purposeful is probably the better word, but very purposeful in our approach to ensuring that we maintain our health, both not just physically, but what are we eating? How are we exercising, and how are we maintaining our mental health and our brain health, and really making sure that we're sharing our feelings so that we don't create story that becomes uncontrollable. That gets or I don't want to say the word controllable, because it makes it sound like you have control. You actually don't, but it becomes unintentional.
Totally.
And it happens without awareness.
Right.
And so that is, to me, the message, like it's
you want it to be with purpose.
Yeah. And it's so your message is beyond beautiful in this regard. The crazy part is it's not over. You come out of sobriety, you start to reestablish yourself in your sport. And I use the word sport not because I'm trying to avoid horses, but it's like some people can't understand the high level of sport that riding is.
Right.
And so the commitment, the dedication, a lot of people think, well, it's the horse. Yeah, the horse plays a part.
Right.
But the bigger part is the ability to be able to connect with the horse. And what you said earlier, I think earlier in the podcast, you said, not to be able to think about it, to be able to create your skill set so that you are unconsciously competent.
Yeah.
You're operating at a level where you don't have to think, you're instinctive.
You're just one with the horse, and they trust you because of that.
That's it. You're in the zone. People call it in the zone or in flow or whatever the fancy names are for them now. But that is, those are the kinds of things that define champions. And so you're on your road back. Congratulations.
Thank you. And
not the end of the story.
Exactly. We're just beginning here.
So you end up crashing a horse in a fence.
It left a stride early. It was actually in a practice arena, and it was supposed to be like the last thing I did right before we left. We'd been at the tour show for 2 weeks, about 2 hours away from where we were living in Texas, and the distance was mismeasured, and I didn't have anybody measure it, and I just galloped to it and didn't realize, I had that slight conversation with myself as I was cantering over the first part of the exercise, like, I don't think I know who set this. This doesn't look right. This isn't what we had before. But by then,
as you're galloping to the fence, right? Okay.
And I'm already fully committed. I am going at a good clip. And now my eye can tell that this is not good. Like, it's not set the way I think it is. And I'm going way too fast to do anything about it.
And just for the layperson, actually, so people who don't understand horse riding, one of the big key components to a great rider is having a great eye.
Yes.
And so what she's describing right now is like you have to have eye of distance, and you have to be able to control the horse to get to the jump at the right point, the timing has to be perfect. So timing is all part of expertise and practice, but it's also part of your eye to be able to judge distance.
Yes. No, that's absolutely true. But
it's very hard.
This was a set distance, because then normally the amateur gets on and it's set so that she can't make a mistake. It's set on a certain amount of strides, but it was not set the way I thought it was. It was supposed to be set long, on a longer distance to make the horse go forward. So I came with the horse with a lot of speed, so that he would be forward for the amateur to get on to show. but it was set short. So I'm trying to think of an analogy for this, but
I think it would be like if you're thinking about a hurdler, it's like moving the hurdle 3 feet forward.
Yeah, or thinking like the car in front of you is about to accelerate through the green light and they're stopping because I now think we need to go. So I'm kicking him and I think I have 3 strides, but it's only set in 2.5. So he leaves in 2 and catches the pole and flips over completely. And I went straight on my head and broke my C1 completely and the ligament that goes in front of my spinal cord. And I shouldn't be alive or walking. 2% of people survive it, and those 2% are in wheelchairs and on respirators. So
is this a similar accident that happened to
Christopher Reeve? Yeah, it's actually exactly what happened to him.
So, I mean,
I was just jumping a much bigger jump, but same injury.
Right. Yeah. So same injury, same falling over, landing on your head.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, by the grace of God, like the grace of God.
It was literally my second horse show back in sobriety.
At this point, so obviously you go to the hospital, you have broken C1.
I was most mad because I had just gotten my license back and I was so excited to drive the car home. And I was like, man, now I don't get to drive home. This sucks. Like,
That's funny. Well, so now how are you feeling in the hospital? Like what?
I was just in a lot of pain and they kept talking about my nose. Well, I couldn't feel that my nose was on the side of my face because all I could feel is that my neck hurt. And I'm like, what are you guys talking about? My nose is like, what's wrong with my nose? And the doctor's like, I don't think you want to see it. I'm like, how bad could it really be? And he just looked at me and was like, it's bad. And I was like, okay, well, I've broken it a billion times. Like people joke, like, do you hate your face or something? Because I never put my hands out. Knock on wood. That's probably why I've never broken my wrists. I just break my face.
Just break your face.
Yeah.
Okay. Who needs a wrist when you
I just go straight
have
on
your
my
face?
Right.
Right.
I actually fell off when I was a kid and my face was rebuilt off a picture. Like all my teeth are dental implants except for my molars and a couple bottom ones.
When you were a kid?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so
I've had a tracheotomy. Yeah. But it was all, freak stuff. Like not like horses trying to be malicious. It was just freak stuff. And if I meant to go out on a horse, I meant to go out on a horse. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Spoken like a true athlete and a true competitor.
Yeah.
So in the hospital, do you have these feelings of like, oh my God, like what else could go wrong in my life? Like, did you, because I would imagine, and this is just my imagination or my hallucination, that at some point in time, I mean, you're going to have to take pain medications. So are you worried about sobriety at this point? And are you just at the point where it's like, fuck, are you kidding me? Like,
well, a little bit. Like when I first, my blood pressure was dropping and stuff, I was conscious the whole time. And we get in the ambulance and the guy's like, I'm going to give you some fentanyl. And I was like, I just told you I'm in recovery. He's like, it's not a street drug dose of fentanyl. Like this is something you have to take. Your body is in a lot of pain. Like we can tell by the way your blood pressure and all that,
but, you're in shock.
But in my mind, I'm like, you can't give me fentanyl. Are you crazy? Like, you know what I mean? And he just kind of started laughing. He was like, this is like a legal medical dose. Like you need it. This is like we're in the middle of nowhere, like 45-minute ride to the hospital. And then, I've had to learn how to manage to take, I got off of like the very hard painkillers immediately, like as fast as I could. But I have had to learn through the help of my sponsor and doctors. All my doctors know I'm in recovery, but I have to take a very, very low grade pill for my neck. And my addict mind was like, oh, well, if you're prescribed this many, then you must take this many per day. And then I would stress about it if the pharmacy didn't have it or something. My sponsor was like, well, here's a newsflash. How about you don't take them all every day? And I was like, you are so smart. Like, that just had never dawned on me. And then I was like, oh. So then I didn't take them all every day. So now I have months and months worth because I don't take them all. But that's how messed up my brain was that it never occurred to me that I just thought since I was taking them properly that I was already ahead of the game. You know, like it's just my brain was that like messed up. And then I think sometimes I think it's God's way of being like, okay, you didn't want to be a slave to a drug anymore, but you chose that for so many years. So now you're going to learn how to manage your life. Like that's how I try to look at it, you know? And I just, sometimes I'm too honest and I tell people too much and people use it against me and things like that. But I also know that what other people say about me is none of my business. And especially down here, it's been hard because I've had a lot of success and there are a lot of people that are so supportive. I mean, like, it's humbling how many people are supportive, but there are some haters.
But your rehab was
6 months in the neck brace alone, like 24/7. 24/7. I wasn't allowed to do anything for a couple months. Then I was finally sound enough that I was allowed to teach. Wasn't allowed to lift poles or anything, but I was allowed to teach. So I did get to fly to Traverse City, which I'm really grateful for because I think it made me a much better teacher because I threw myself into my teaching, which is normally something I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do because I was always on the back of a horse. I was always very good at teaching a rider that could ride well because it's easy when you ride well and you're teaching someone who also has talent. But it really made me see things in a different way and try to think outside of the box and how do I get this message across to this person that maybe has less talent. So I try to, I'm not perfect at it. It's progress, not perfection, but I always try to learn from whatever situation I'm in or make the most out of each situation, you know, like instead of like, oh, poor me, I wish I was showing. Like, sure, I wish I was showing. But at least I was in a freaking neck brace at a horse show with the people that I love getting to teach and not on freaking meth. You know what I mean?
on the street
or
getting
in
your
an
face bashed in by your boyfriend.
Yeah. I've even been accused of being on a stimulant because I have such a passion for life now that I get too overly excited sometimes. For other people, like for me to want to get up in the morning, like I wake up before my alarm and I want to jump out of bed and I want to get ready. Like I was miserable for 20 years because I couldn't get out of bed if I didn't have drugs. And I was obsessing then over if we didn't have it, then I wasn't going to be able to get out of bed. And then when with this and that. And so to know that I don't have to live like that anymore. And I have such a joy that I think sometimes people that don't know me well or whatever, like I am so excited and so passionate and almost so positive that some people don't believe it's real.
Do you find that, how do you deal with that? Or do you find people have difficulty navigating the situation of prior drug use and sobriety and how to interact or how they should act? Or
I mean, I'm pretty open about it, but for sure, some people are afraid to ask. They think that I'm going to be offended. I'm like the opposite. Like I'll answer any question because if it could help someone or. But I also need to be a little smarter because I have to realize not everybody is actually asking me because they want my help or my opinion. They're looking for a way to dissect it in a way. Do you know what I'm saying? So sometimes it's better to say nothing. I'm not good at saying nothing. But for the most part, people have been incredibly supportive and what I try to tell myself, as much as it does bother me when I hear some of the things that I hear, is that the truth will always show itself and actions are louder than any words can ever be. And so as long as you're living your truth, you have nothing to worry about, and actions speak louder than words. And I just try to keep my head down and keep doing what I do best. And I love the horses. And
Is that how you get through like any of the, and I don't know if there are any or many, but of the naysayers or the people who have doubt or we oftentimes, and what made me think about this question was just that I see so many people worried about what other people think. And they walk around and they're doing things not because they want to, but because they're worried about what somebody else is going to think about. What's the watch they're wearing, what shoes they're wearing, or how they do this job, or how they show up here or there, or whatever.
And I see so much of that. And a lot of that also kept me sick. Of course, like, I like nice things. I like to look nice, whatever. But at the end of the day, I really try to tell myself, like, this is my life. I used to worry, like, well, what if I go out dancing and then people are going to think I'm drinking because I'm having fun? Like, I'm 43 years old. At this point, I can do what I want. I know my truth. I know that my riding proves my truth as well. And then I see people that obsess over what other people think. And that's not a way to live, like, that's just being insecure and not knowing yourself. And it's sad. And it's also another thing is most people are far too selfish to be noticing what anybody else is doing. They're so worried about themselves. They're not noticing your shirt or your outfit or how you're walking or what you look like,
Oh my God. No, that's so true. That is so true. I mean, if you were going to encapsulate your greatest learnings through this life, how do you, actually, before I ask this question, but how do you frame your life now? Like, how do you see it? How do you describe it? Or what's the words or the feelings that you have for your journey?
A miracle is what comes to mind, but gratitude, and then like my purpose. And my purpose is to use my gift for the horses, but even more so, I feel a huge drive to carry the message to the people that are still suffering in any way that I can. And so for you guys to come to me with this podcast was like huge for me, because if there's anything that I could possibly be more passionate about than the horses, and I love the horses, whether or not they're throwing me on my head, whether I'm winning a Grand Prix, whether I'm petting them in their stall or whatever. But if my story can help somebody else, relate or not be afraid or say, hey, you know what? Maybe I don't want to live like this anymore. Maybe there is hope for me. That's my goal. And I think that's what my purpose in life is the horses, and to use my recovery to be able to save others.
I think, as you were saying that, one of the things that popped in my mind, and I'm certainly guilty of this, is that when I see somebody in that state, whether it's on the street, whether they're homeless, whatever, I'd have to say one of my first inclinations, or definitely used to be, I have way more compassion now for it, would be to judge.
I mean, I still do it.
Yeah. And I, your story, I really think is a beautiful example of showing people that, when we encounter these unfortunate situations, that, a little bit of love and a little bit of compassion goes a long way to helping people feel like some of the feelings that you had talked about earlier was like this lack of belief in yourself and this shame. And, it's just, I don't want to be too altruistic, because I'm a pretty pragmatic person, but I also think like there's an opportunity for us to share and show and give love. That doesn't mean you have to go around kissing every homeless person or anything like that, but you certainly can show up in a different way. Or somebody who is struggling with drugs, or someone that could be on the path.
Yeah.
That maybe all they need is just that belief, and that understanding that they're hurting and there's something real, and that there's places to go.
Well, and I think something for me that I could relate to was I was feeling misunderstood a lot. And that was because I didn't know myself, but I also make I'm having a vocabulary blank, but I make an effort to give thanks or to show empathy and gratitude towards, like, let's say a bathroom attendant or a crossing guard or someone who normally gets blown off or people are rude to because they're just trying to make a living as well. You know what I mean? And then there's all these billionaires around, and we're coming in, we're using the bathroom, we leave water all over the sink, and these women are in there and they're cleaning up after us every single time. Nobody says thank you. They probably treat them like trash. Like, like everyone is living their own lives, and people don't think about that because everyone just thinks about themselves. Like, you don't even think about how, no wonder they resent us. You know what I mean? Or maybe aren't super polite because we treat them like garbage, and they're humans. Like, and they've got families, they've got, they're working their butts off. And so I'm not perfect at any of it, but I do make an effort to try to give back. And especially now that I make a little bit of money, I try to tip people. I try to show that I appreciate things. And that can just be a simple thank you or a smile or, hey, how you doing today? Like, just to show that you care,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people, to that point, I think people are living their story.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily living their life. They're living the story that they have about their life. And if we, and Tony Robbins says this, very often, and it's in order to influence someone, you have to know what influences them. You have to understand their story. And that, I think, is a large piece to going a long way to show up present and compassionate for others. Doesn't mean that you have to enable it, but present and compassion. Emily, your story is amazing.
Thank you.
Your courage,
thank you,
is even more incredible.
Well, thank you. It doesn't seem courageous to me. It's just the truth.
Well, but it is. But it's like because I think there's a lot of people. I don't want you to walk away dismissing your courage.
Thank you.
Because so many people, this has happened to a lot of people. You're not the only one. But your willingness to get on the show with somebody you barely know, to have a completely open, honest conversation with absolute vulnerability is not an easy thing to do. And I feel, this time that we spent, the last couple hours that we spent together, I feel has made a mark on my life. Your story
it certainly has on mine.
Touched my heart.
I feel like I've known you my whole life, so it certainly wasn't awkward for me.
Well, I'm so glad that you're here, and I'm so glad that you could share with our listeners. I'm glad you could share with me selfishly. And I I wish you all the best, and I'm so grateful. And if somebody wanted to reach out to you, if somebody's stuck in a place, is there a place that they can reach out to you?
Instagram is probably the best.
Let's do that.
And it's The Real Emily Williams is my Instagram. It's The Real Emily Williams. There's no horse in the picture. Maybe I should change that.
That's okay.
But there's some fake accounts out there that have pictures of me on horses, like with my name, with numbers and stuff. That those are not me. I am the real Emily Williams. And you can DM me. I'm not the greatest at checking them right away, so do not take it personally if it takes me weeks or months to respond, but I will get back to you. And it's been an honor to be on here, and I hope I can do it again. And yeah, this has been totally awesome, so thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Okay. Guys, have an awesome week. Please share this story, because we never know who out there is hurting or needs to listen to something like this. These are some of the most important things. You know, we're a business podcast. Business is awesome. But you know, caring and giving to others is even more awesome. So please, don't hold back on sharing this if you think somebody is hurting or somebody should listen to this message. Appreciate you guys. God bless. Thank you so much. Thank you, Emily Williams.
Thank you so much.
You're wonderful. Thank you.
No, you're wonderful. Thank you. I hope to do it again.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Thank you.